Is God punishing you, or maybe is he just preparing you? Welcome to the Daily Devo. I am Vince Miller. This week, we're reading through 1 Samuel chapter 5. I have titled this chapter, Clearing the Path to Glory. Now, so far in chapter 5, we discovered that the Philistines, the enemy of God, captured the Ark of the Covenant, took it back to foreign territory in Ashdod, setting it up in the temple of Dagon, which was a tragic mistake. The following day, the people awake to find that Dagon had fallen prostrate before the Ark of God. And despite their shock, they propped Dagon back up again. The next morning, they discover that Dagon has fallen again. This time, his head is cut off and his hands are cut off, which terrified them. Then we read this in verses 6 through 7. And I did say before that verse 6 is the key verse of this chapter. It reads, "The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, 'The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon, our God.'" We have a couple of choices as to what this possible disease was. We're not really sure. Choice one is the bubonic plague or the black plague. Some people think it was this because that was transmitted by fleas and rats that spread to humans. Or, choice two, it could have also been a massive outbreak of hemorrhoids. A desperate need for preparation H among the entire territory of Ashdod. Either way, even though we don't know what it was, this outbreak was a major pain in the butt. So much so that they associated the affliction with the recent capture of the Ark of the Covenant. And what is fascinating about the situation is that the people who believed that they had just defeated God now believe that God was defeating them. They have seen just enough natural occurrences to believe that God is punishing them. You know, discipline at some point meets us all. At some point, we are all disciplined by God. Most of the time, this discipline comes in the form of very natural consequences stemming from disobedience to God or his authority in this life. These consequences do inflict pain, and they compel us to pay attention, thus driving us to pay attention to God. For instance, very practical example here. If you are intoxicated and you drive a vehicle and then you get pulled over, there are a number of consequences, right? For those of you who have been through the circumstance, you know what happens. You get arrested, you get ticketed, you lose driving privileges, you incur legal fees, you face probation, insurance increases, etc., etc., etc. It never ends. And in this example, it's relatively easy to see the connection between our human defiance and God's divine punishment. It's even easier to see if you function with a biblical worldview that assumes that God is the divine judge who governs all things and operates through human governments to administer judgment for human defiance. Now, in the case of the Philistines, they did not have a biblical worldview. They held polytheistic views. Yet they were right in this situation to establish a divine connection with God. The heavy hand of God's judgment was afflicting them. Through very natural circumstances, God was trying to get their attention. And they did make the connection. What they neglected to do was to worship him. Instead, they would dispose of God by sending the ark of God to another town, another Philistine town, for that matter. So here is what you need to see today. When you experience affliction and discipline in life, you should pause and assess the divine signs. Afflictions by God are meant to get our attention. So take time to pause and reflect and assess. Go to God in prayer. Ask God to show you why this is happening in your life. Discern if God is afflicting you for disobedience or to drive you toward deeper obedience. Either way, God will likely show you something that he wants you to see. Remember, there are moments when we experience affliction without seeing the act of disobedience. For example, consider the stories of maybe Job. or even better, Jesus. Affliction, in both cases, did not stem from disobedience, but were designed to stretch their obedience, to display their great obedience. Both types of discipline and affliction have occurred in the story to this point. If you've been following me through Samuel, you will see that some people in Israel were not disobedient to God, yet were being disciplined, like Samuel and his family. On the other hand, God was directly disciplining others, like Eli and his family, who had been blatantly disobedient and given lots of opportunity to change. Either way, the right response is always to bow and worship the Lord. It is to submit to him and his discipline and be changed by his affliction. It's not to do what the Philistines do here and merely suppose it is God and then dispose of him. I love you guys. I pray this has blessed you. If it has, share it with someone else, and I'll see you right back here again.